Okay, it's game number 10 of the World Chess Championship, 10 out of 12. And I'm just going to dive right into it. So up to this point, all the games have been drawn. 4.5, 4.5. Fabi with 2 whites left, and Magnus only 1. So white for Fabiano today. If this is your first game, Fabiano Caruana is from the United States, the challenger, rated 28-32. And his opponent, who played c5, the Sicilian, is the reigning world champion, Magnus Carlsen from Norway, rated 28-35. So he's been the world champion now since 2013, when he grabbed the title away from Vishy Anand. And he's been the world #1 for longer than that. And yeah, the gap between him and #2 has never been closer. So a really anticipated match, and so far it's been really tense. It's been draws all the games, but there have been chances for both of the guys. I mean, not huge chances, like, you know, one move per game where, you know, something could have happened. But so far nobody has been able to grab their chance. Now we see the Sicilian yet again on the board, and this has been played in all the games where Fabiano has had the white pieces. And I was expecting one e5 today, and well, maybe we'll see it in the last game, but it's starting to look more and more like the Sicilian was intended as the weapon for the whole match. I guess only the last game will tell the truth. But okay, just like in game 8, Fabiano goes for the Open Sicilian. And we repeat the line. e5, the Sveshnikov, knight d to b5, and d6. And again, we repeat game 8. We don't go for the main line, which is to play bishop to g5. But sort of the main side line here, knight to d5. Okay, we keep on repeating game 8, so we'll go fast over these moves. a4. And this move, yeah, I briefly explained it in comments to game 8. It's just to gain space on the queen side. In many cases, black will kick this knight away, and then we'll push the pawn. We'll get some space for our pieces, and the knight can maneuver like in game 8. The main move is c4, so it's a new sideline, a new wrinkle that Fabi wanted to employ for this game. And just like in game 8, we get the bishops out for both sides and castle, and the knight that went to b8 reroutes to d7. Okay, so here is where we deviate from game 8. In game 8, we saw bishop to d2 from Fabiano, which was to support the pawn going to a5, enabling the knight to come back to c4. But for some reason, Fabiano did not repeat that line. He played b4 here, which is a novelty. So this has never been played before in chess history. At least in classical games. There might be some online games, but it's unlikely. And another surprise, because, well, I thought, I mean, Fabiano got a pretty good position in game 8. But sometimes it seems like the players don't want to be sitting ducks for their opponent's preparation. So with this move b4, he obviously completely avoids black's preparation, as it's a novelty. And we can assume that, well, he has looked at this move, so he has some ideas. And this was reflected in the time expenditure in the opening, where Fabi got a little bit of a time advantage. So a6 now by Carlsen, the knight has to retreat, and a5. So we could have played a5 in one go here, but why not kick the knight away first? So that's what he did, a6. So we get the same idea, but we kick the knight away, so very logical. Fabiano now takes on a5, the rook takes a5, knight c4 hitting the rook, and the rook goes back to a8. White sort of finishes development with bishop to e3, and yeah, this seems like the best square for the bishop, eyeing this diagonal and the b6 square. f5 by Magnus, and now a5. The other idea in these lines, when you are faced with e5 and f5, is to play f4 yourself. But Fabi didn't fancy that in this position. Perhaps with the trade and this pawn being having left the board, it means that you're sort of weakening black squares. So maybe if I put my bishop here, maybe at some point the knight here, white can start to feel the pressure on the black squares. In any case, he decided not to play f4 and allowed black to play f4 here. But with the move a5, he has secured the square on b6 for his bishop. Now queen to e8. And here, rook to a3. Some people mentioned a move like bishop h5 as a possibility. Then g6 and the bishop goes back. And I guess the idea is that g6 is blocking the queen from going to g6 where it wants to go. But rook a3 was played, and this looks like a flexible move. He wants to have the rook available for defensive purposes. And also maybe you're ready to double the rooks, let's say on the b file, if something happens. So just trying to stay flexible. You know, sometimes you don't know exactly where the game is going, so you just try to improve pieces and put them on squares that you think are more flexible. Now the queen comes to g6, logical play. So black, usually in this line, is trying to attack on the king side, and that's precisely what's happening here. Bishop c7 now by Fabiano. Yeah, putting some pressure on d6. Not relevant at the moment, but it means that the queen can't move away. And also we might think about knight b6 in some cases if this knight moves. So sort of a prophylactic move in a way, because yeah, black can't now readily play here because of this move, when this guy doesn't have any squares. But black can continue his attack. He just plays e4, and now these pawns are starting to look a bit menacing. We're already threatening to play f3 when we have this pin, and mate is imminent on g2. White would have to give up a piece. So Fabiano puts the king in the corner, king h1, unpinning the g2 pawn, which can now take on f3 if anything appears there. But now a very powerful move by Carlsen, and yeah, this is now a very double-edged position, and well, Carlsen signals that he doesn't mind playing for a win in this position. He plays a very, yeah, a move out of left field, b5. And yeah, this is just kind of signaling war. So first of all, if the knight moves, it doesn't have many squares. If it goes back, then we play knight e5. A wonderful square for the knight, and we're ready to play f3, and the bishop comes into the game. Just beautiful, beautiful stuff for black. So here or here, depending on what's going on. If we take en passant, ab, now we take on a3. Okay, we lost a pawn, but now the knight is out of the game, and also the rook can't swing over the third rank to defend. And here actually black can probably play very powerfully here with f3, takes, and knight e5, just opening up all the lines. And here white has to be really careful. A sample line, okay, we'll play a bad move now, but the position is difficult for white. If he takes here, very greedy, we play bishop e4, bishop to h3, followed by queen takes e4, and this is already game over. So just to demonstrate the dangers for white in this line. So it seems like, yeah, Fabiano didn't fancy defending there, so he found the only square left for the knight, which is knight b6. It attacks the rook, but also it importantly trades off this knight, which otherwise would have gone to e5, where it beautifully supports black's attack. So trade on b6. Now that the knight has left c4, this guy is undefended, so he can't take with the pawn. It is pinned, so we have to take with the bishop. And now another small quiet move, but with very aggressive intentions. Queen g5. The pawn on b5, it's hanging. Can white take it? Well, it's a good question. Maybe he can if he's a computer. In the game, Fabi played g3. He said that he regretted that move, and he thought after the game that he should have played f3, and after e3 only then g3. And in some lines he gets the e pawn, the e3 pawn. If black takes, we play rook g1, and things should be okay, although the position is still complicated. But the question is, can you take on b5? Maybe you can if you're a computer, and they did have a look at the lines after the game, at the press conference, with rook f6. And here they thought f3 was the best move for white, e3, queen e2. This was suggested by Carlsen, and then they continued with rook h6. And Carlsen thought g4 here, and I think they're more or less right. This is best play according to the computer, and the game is still complicated. White seems to have put a stop to the attack, but like Carlsen said, the game goes on, and black is not without chances here. But one line that sort of illustrates how dangerous this position is, maybe for the layman or at lower levels. After rook f6, if white gets really greedy and just, okay, let's say bishop c6, you want to attack the rook, maybe push the a pawn at some point. We can maybe just sack the rook, rook h6. We take the rook, queen h4. We just want to give mate here. There's no way to defend this. You have to play the pawn forward, pawn to h3. But now bishop g4. Of course, a pin here on the h pawn, so you can't take on g4. And yeah, black is just going to play f3. Blow the position open, and this should be winning for black. White probably has to sacrifice the queen here on g4, and should not have enough for the queen. So a very dangerous position, and yeah, Fabi took some time here before he played g3, which doesn't look like the best move. And now, yeah, the white position becomes very critical. b4 by Carlsen. First getting this pawn out of danger, rook b3, and now bishop to h3. Okay, white has to avoid material losses, and now f3. And this looks very menacing for white. Okay, we don't want to allow bishop g2. Maybe in some lines we can sacrifice the exchange, but Fabi prefers to keep material equality. Plays bishop f1. We have a trade. And now white sort of permanently is stuck with the king on h1 and on the back rank. So you always have to keep an eye. If you try to activate your pieces, you always have to keep an eye out on the queen at some stage landing here, threatening mate. If your pieces come out, you always have to be on the lookout for back rank issues. A heavy piece landing on the back rank with check. So this should be pretty good for black. He takes the pawn on d5. But also he's dropping the pawn on b4, so the material is still equal. So white is just trying to hold on here. Queen e6. Okay, getting ready to fortify the pawn chain even more. Rook to b5. And here Carlsen goes for the bishop trade, bishop to d8. Probably a good idea. His bishop didn't seem to be doing much on e7. No real targets. You're not gonna target these pawns, so might as well trade it. Queen to e1. We have a trade, and Carlsen allows this protected pawn on b6. But it will seem like it's a big weakness because, okay, we play rook b8 now. We can at some stage play d5 and maybe have a quick attack on this pawn. Especially since if white starts to maneuver the heavy pieces, you constantly have to worry about these threats that we talked about, queen coming here or the back rank. But okay, queen e3 protecting the pawn, queen to c4, attacking the c2 pawn and the rook, so the rook retreats to b2. Rook b7, so black perhaps thinking about doubling the rooks and yeah, attacking the pawn. Fabiano counterattacks, rook to d1, and now queen e2, a tricky move. I think that Fabiano said that he had missed some ideas connected with his move. He wanted to play queen b3, I believe. But that move doesn't work. And if we try that, then queen b3 check. We can play simply king h8 and attack here and then attack here. You can't defend both. But fortunately for Fabi, he had rook e1. We can also mention that queen d4 is met with e3. Can't take with the pawn because of the mate on g2. And you can't take with the queen because we still attack the rook. So a very nice way to sort of cut off the coordination of the pieces. But rook e1 is just in time. Rook takes e3 and d5. So now we have a rook ending. Pawns are equal. But still white has this bad king. But this pawn is sort of holding everything together. Black needs to you know extend some forces to contain this pawn, and winning it can be tricky, but once you do, white should be able to counterattack something. So maybe white can hold on here. Rook c8, rook to a3, let's see, king to f7. So black activates his king and white sort of just waits. He can't really do much. g4, rook a6. Rook b3 looked more natural, but rook a6 also has its advantages. One of them being that if this rook moves, maybe we can play b7 with check. King e5. King g3. Okay, black needs to find some idea to advance here. Maybe at some stage you want to try to get the king to c5 to attack this. But then I give you a check and you probably have to go back. So black sort of temporizes here with h6, h5. And yeah, at this stage it's becoming clear that it's very hard for black to make any progress. And Carlsen tried king d4 here, which is almost too much. And it's actually white that takes over the initiative now. He plays rook b5. And all of a sudden he's ready to target this pawn on d5 with his heavy pieces. Rook d6, rook a4 check, and the king goes back. Rook a to b4, king e6, and now c4, undermining the pawns. Now if you play d4, which looks tempting, then yeah, c5 looks like a strong move, and you can't both contain this and protect the pawn. So Carlsen took on c4, but now rook takes c4, and now you see that these pawns are dropping off. So a nice job of undermining the dangerous black pawns by Caruana. Carlsen took on b6, now rook takes e4 check, king f7, rook over to f5, and rook f6. So the last few moves are rook takes, king takes f3, king f7, and king g3. And the draw was offered by Caruana, and of course Carlsen accepted. Caruana made no attempt to play for a win here. This is simply a dead draw. You're not going to be able to make a pass pawn. Eventually you have to push like f4 and g5, but that's easily contained by black. You will just chop off on g5, and eventually you will have a pass pawn on the g or the h file, but black will be in a very good defensive position and easy draw. So no need for these guys to contest this position. But yeah, that was game 10, and only 2 games remain. And yeah, the guys, it seems like the tension is getting to them. They both admitted it at the press conference. And yeah, we'll have to see. 2 more games. Can we get a decisive game, or are we going to the rapid games? Only time will tell, but I will see you when the time will tell us. Stick around for some tactics, and see you in the next video.